Probably true. This is, New York can prohibit sale of guns, but guns come in from other states. And there's a little that New York can do about it. They try to, police concealed weapons, but it's difficult. So guns are awash in even the states like New York and New Jersey, where they try to keep the guns out. But because states like Texas or South Carolina or Virginia or Mississippi allow free sale of guns with few restrictions, the states that want to protect their citizens are unable to do so.
All right, so the drug cartels have so much money now that they're actually treated by some, security services, including ours, as foreign powers, effectively. That's how much money they have. So the idea is that unless they can buy a gun from a gun dealer in South Carolina, they're just out of luck, not going to be able to find a gun. Nowhere on the black market with their $30 billion or trillion, or whether it's up to that, it's just unrealistic. If you're in a business where you need to have access to immediate and brutal violence in order to compete in that business, as you do because of our drug laws, by the way. You have to be capable of immediate and brutal violence if you're in the drug trade in this country. You don't have access to the courts. You don't have access to a police force if you're in this business. You are going to acquire a weapon, undoubtedly going to acquire a weapon. And yes, it's going to be a brutal and violent industry because it's lawless. It attracts lawless people, and they have no access to things like courts and contracts to resolve disputes, or police for protection. And so I think the gun violence in the Mexican, sort of drug trade is very concerning. But I think it's our drug laws that are provoking that violence, not our gun laws. You had another question?
Yeah, I just find this really intriguing. I'm not a law student. I have my master's in English. But you have just made...
Sorry, not to interrupt, but you can speak up.
I'm sorry. Yeah. And I was just going to ask, you actually just, made some linkages with the issue of drugs. So we have the issue of drugs, we have, in relationships like privacy, drugs, sexual contact, and guns. Where do you see that? Guns, it seems to me that it is the Federalist philosophy as a modern political movement centered around this gun issue. You seem to be saying it's not. However, how do you justify these linkages if it's not race? Because the history that's just been referred to here has, to me, demonstrates that there's a racial element behind these policies. Why do you view the home as a territory where health is not a factor? Health is another issue. I'm wondering what is the Federalist position on that? Because am I safe? Isn't a gun a form of expression that inherently is more menacing than the other forms of expression you're talking about?
I don't see race as linking together anything that I've said. What I see linking together, what I have said, is liberty. And the idea that whether it's drugs or guns or sex or anything else, the government has to have a good reason for telling you that you can't do something. That's as far as I go. And, I just don't make arbitrary distinctions between, look, I don't think having a joint, a marijuana cigarette in your house is threatening to anybody. And I don't think having a gun just by itself is particularly threatening. More people are killed by it every year in this country. Many more people are killed by cars than guns. It's about 40,000 highway deaths in cars, about 35,000 gun deaths, half of which are suicides. So I want the government to justify why I can't have or do any particular thing, and I wanted to offer some pretty strong evidence. And I don't think we just draw arbitrary lines and say, oh yeah, if it's speech or sex, then the government's got to give us a good reason for interfering with it. Oh, is it a gun? No. Is it a joint? No, it's okay. That's my view. I want the government in court with evidence whenever it interferes with liberty, and I don't see any racial aspect to that. I don't see a necessary racial aspect to that.
All right, everyone, Professor Askin, please. So once again, everyone, thank you very much for attending on behalf of the Federalist Society.
Please sign our sign-in sheet that was circulated before so that we can have an estimate of how many people are here. Also, I just want to tell you guys that the Institute for Justice runs an excellent summer internship program. I'm not sure only for 1L, but they run this Cook internship, I believe that it's called. The Coke Fellowship. They have information on it on the Institute for Justice website. Also, Mr. Neily brought these packets with him, so I would encourage you all to take a look at this program. Through my summer internship that I did over the summer with the Alliance Defense Fund, one of my colleagues worked for the Coke program and had an excellent experience there. So certainly look into that. I would also like to remind you all that 2 weeks from now, on Wednesday, October 27th, the Federalist Society is having its next debate, where we will be looking at the very interesting question of whether Arizona's new immigration law violates the Constitution. For that debate, we will be bringing in Hans von Spakovsky from the Heritage Foundation in Washington, D.C., and he will be participating along with Professor Udi Ofer, who teaches at New York School of Law and is also a board member of the New York Civil Liberties Union. So once again, thank you very much, everyone, for attending. Feel free to take any food that is left. And thank you very much, Mr. Neily.
Thank you.